There was that priest who went to his bishop and he said, "Oh, Father, every Sunday my church is filled with women. The men do not come because they've spent the night playing cards and drinking and smoking." And the bishop said, "Oh, wonderful. What wonderful preparation. Just imagine how it will be when they turn their attention to the Almighty." The other day, that little anecdote was reminded about the two Arabs sitting on the side of the road smoking their hubble-bubble pipe. And just then a camel lumbered by, and the first Arab said to the second Arab in his sort of somnolent state, "What does that remind you of?" The second Arab said, "Food." And the first Arab, with some surprise, says, But we're Arabs, we don't eat camels." The second Arab said, "But everything reminds me of food." And remembering that in every story, every character, symbol and archetype represents an aspect of our self, our psyche. There's that story about the ruler. In fact, he was an emir, and he was a very good man. He took care of his people very well, making sure that the coffers were full, to the degree that very often, in disguise and in the company of his Grand Vizier, he would go out into the town and mix with the ordinary people, seeing how they were faring, asking about their troubles. And one of these occasions, he was sitting at a coffee shop with a number of merchants, when out of the blue, one of the merchants mentioned, "Well, our emir, may he live forever, must be very bored." And suddenly the Grand Vizier's face got red and he got angry. And he said, "What do you mean?" And the merchant said, "Well, all he does all day is entertain emissaries from other places and take care of his harem and so forth." And the emir made a motion to keep his vizier quiet, and he just said to the merchant, "Well, what do you think he should do?" And the merchant said, "Well, he should have a trade." And it seemed that all the other merchants at the table agreed with him, because they all nodded in agreement with what was said. But when the emir and his vizier got back to his palace, the vizier said to the emir, "Tell me, give me permission, sire. I'll go and punish those merchants for being disrespectful of you." And the emir said, No, what they have suggested is very valid." So the very next day, he called to him all the best artisans of the town, the woodworkers, the jewelers, and he inspected each of their works. But then, when it came to the weaver, he was enthralled, and he decided that this is what he was going to do. So from that day on, he came under the tutelage of the best weaver in the whole city. And very soon he had become a very adept weaver. And he found that when he was weaving, all his cares and woes, the worries of state, the concerns that a ruler was always beset with were gone. So in fact, he carried with him at every moment a small loom. But it so happened that one night when he was out in disguise with his vizier, they were accosted and assailed by two robbers. They were dragged back to their lair and tied up where the gold that they had in their robes was taken from them, to the great delight of the robbers, who were then going to slay them. But the vizier, with some ingenuity, said to the robbers, "We are just weavers, and we have been brought to the royal court to weave for the emir and his court and his family. Our weaving is very valuable, and there is no doubt that if it was brought to the court, it would be given great recompense." So the robbers, rubbing their hands together, quickly said, "Well, let's bring whatever is necessary for you to weave." And so they did. And so the emir, taking out his small loom, wove a handkerchief. And in the design of the handkerchief, he wove his favorite design, knowing that when it was brought to the attention of his queen, she would know what it was that the message was being given. So the handkerchief was given to the robbers, who by now had been able to dress themselves in finery with the gold that they had taken from the emir and the vizier. One of them, in his finery, took the handkerchief to the palace, and showing it to the guards, was quickly admitted and taken to the one who was taking care of the harem in which the queen resided. Now, immediately, the weaving was recognized as that of the emir, and when it was brought before the queen, she immediately recognized the work of her beloved sire, her husband. So quickly she said to the eunuch who brought in the handkerchief to her, "Give this man 1,000 gold pieces, but be sure that you have him followed when he returns from whence he came." It had been kept very quiet in the palace that the emir was absent and missing. But of course, when the one who followed the robber back to his lair found that place, he immediately came back, and the queen ordered the guards to go, knowing that her husband had been kept in that place. And so it was greatly appreciated by the emir when the soldiers arrived and broke down the door of the robber's place of abode and saved the emir from his fate. But of course we know the fate of the robbers. Their heads were very peremptorily lopped from their bodies. But the emir, from that moment on, recognized and was able to spread abroad to all what it was that enabled him to be released from that bondage. So the question that's asked arising out of this story is, first of all, what is the symbol indicated by what is said to be a trade? You must have a trade. And when we bring it down to our personal being, we can look and recognize, where does our mind come back to? And how are they related? First of all, what for you in this story does having a trade mean?
When you do a trade, you have to concentrate in one point, and that stills the mind. And to me, that's what the king was doing. And from that point, he's whatever he conveyed, it was able to be understood by his wife.
And in our personal sense, like the little anecdote of the Arabs, what does everything remind us of? For a lot of people, it's coming back to a place of, I don't deserve that, I'm not good enough. It's my fault. How do they go together? What is that you can't forget?